welcome to the How to Use the New StackVision 6.18 Dashboard webinar. I'm Taylor Hempel, and I'm a marketing specialist here at ESC Spectrum. Today, Q&A engineer Jordan Hoffner will talk about the ins and outs of the new StackVision 6.18 dashboard. With that being said, let's begin.
Hi, everyone. Like she said, my name's Jordan Hoffner. I'm a part of the development team as a QA engineer, and I'll be going over new dashboards with a 6.18 release. I'll be going over a few talking points, and then the presentation will mostly be demonstration. So we'll show kind of a side-by-side of new and old dashboards, and then mostly go over some of the features and differences between or with new dashboards. So before we get started, I just kind of wanted to talk about why we did this, why we spent the time doing this. So essentially, we're investing time now to rework the tool so that it'll be more maintainable and better designed product for the future. So lots of backend changes. It's actually completely rewritten backend, similar to the charts rework for many reasons. But dashboards being a larger task, had a lot more moving parts. So we've been working on this for probably about a year now, on top of all of the other software improvements and bug fixes. And then because of this, or due to this work, it gave us the opportunity to revisit and kind of rethink some of the features in the dashboards tool. And make sure they're working in a better and more meaningful way. Things such as the way error messages are working on the back end and the way that they overlay, such as bad connection, expired data, server errors, things like that. Public and private dashboards, math constants, and fleet mode support, to name a couple of things. The main reason for this was because the architecture of the existing dashboard tool and the new client was not really extensible, meaning it was hard to add new features and to finish remaining customer requests due to basically just the way that it was developed. And because of this rework, again, we were able to add lots of new features that were not available in the dashboards tool previously. But have been requested as high priority by customers. And another big thing is that the code of the existing dashboard tool is not reusable. So this amount of time that we spent on this, the development efforts will put StackVision in alignment with other product development needs, such as Prism. So essentially, if we want to export our dashboards tool over to Prism software, we don't have to recreate the wheel. It'll be minimal amount of work required to do so. That's kind of the big picture there. So I'm going to go into some demo, some talking points. So to start off, new dashboards will be replacing old dashboards. So in order to launch dashboards, it'll work exactly the same as it did in 6.17. We moved it into the tools dropdown here. You can kind of ignore this old drop item here. This is a development system, so I have both of them enabled. But in your system, whenever you click the tools dropdown, when you see dashboards here, it'll automatically open to new dashboards. It'll open in a new module, a new window here. Whenever the new dashboards opens, the new window opens, it opens to a new dashboard. From there, you have two options. You can either switch to edit mode and edit that new dashboard, or we change to an Explorer pane. So something that you should immediately notice for those of you that have dashboards and have used dashboards in the past is there used to be kind of a welcome screen that had icons for each of the dashboards here, kind of listed out in a table form with a screenshot of the dashboard to kind of indicate, it gives you a little visual representation of what the dashboard was. We decided to change this workflow a little bit. We're going with this Explorer pane. It's actually a little flyout that's currently pinned when you open a new dashboard. We basically decided to go with the Explorer pane. We felt that it was a simpler and cleaner approach. We had complaints about the old icons before, and there were some bugs with them. Some people liked them, but I think, you know, as they use this Explorer pane, once they get to know the name of the dashboard, not necessarily look for the visual representation of the dashboard, it actually makes it a lot simpler. It's easier to see public and private dashboards this way as well. I'm on an administrator account, so I would be able to see all the private dashboards. We also added a search feature, so if you, for whatever reason, can't find in a list, or you have lots of different options here or lots of different dashboards here, you can actually just start typing, and the dashboard that have whatever you're searching for in the name would kind of be filtered out of the list. This is a lot of testing, so there's a lot going on here, but yeah, again, it should be. We've got some opinions on it, but we feel that as you use it, this should work better than the way that it worked before. So feel free to provide feedback on that as you use it. Hopefully after you use it a couple times, because it takes a little bit to get used to it since it is a little bit different of a workflow. In this Explorer pane, we also have some right-click options. I just want to demo really fast. So this would be how you, for instance, would like rename a dashboard. You can open it into a new tab. We did re-enable our tabs, so you can have multiple dashboards open in the same window now. Again, you can also open a new window if you want to do that. The tabs work where you can strip them out. You can have them side by side, whatever you want to do, just like you would kind of expect them to behave. You can also delete dashboards this way. Probably don't want to be doing that, but and then of course we can open them. We can also open them by just strictly double clicking. And then just really quick, the really big other UI thing that I want to point out is we do have a link to our online documentation up here in the right-hand corner. A lot of work went into documenting these new dashboard changes. So it's I find it really useful. I really recommend if you have any questions, if there are any different things that used to work before, maybe don't. It probably is still there, just maybe slightly changed or modified. We'll go through this a little bit. There's a couple of things that I want to point out in here. So we'll go through this in a little bit. But again, that help documentation is just a click away from within the window. So we don't have to switch back to the other StackVision window to get to that help. All right, so I wanted to take a second to say that the first priority with implementing this new dashboard was complete backwards compatibility with old dashboards. So all existing dashboards will work automatically. There's no additional steps required, nothing you need to do to import or export or anything crazy like that. Immediately after upgrade, all users can run their dashboards in display mode. There should be no modifications of object placement, settings, anything like that, just slightly UI redesign. Existing dashboards can also be edited in new dashboards, meaning that things that were created in older versions, not only are view only, we can take them and edit them and make changes to them just like we would expect. We had lots of beta. Well, we had a few beta customers. We wanted to make sure we reached out to a few people and made sure that all of their existing dashboards were upgradable. And this is on top of tons and tons of internal testing. This is definitely the longest developed and most tested feature I think that we've ever released, and for good reason, right? This is a pretty key piece of software. It's pretty critical that it works and it works well and it does what it's supposed to do. It's people use it for their daily operations, so it needs to work. So for this reason, it's actually been even pushed back a couple of releases to make sure that we get it a fully fleshed out piece of software. It's nothing half-baked. Just to say, if anyone does have any issues opening existing dashboards, please let us know. Let us know right away. You shouldn't, but If you do, reach out to our support team. That way we can get this stuff documented and we can figure out the issue. But hopefully we don't run into that. So before I get into creating new dashboards, which is where the majority of the change was made, editing dashboards, I just kind of want to show I guess a then and now, before and after. So I'm going to open up a dashboard here. This is an existing dashboard that was developed in an older version. You can kind of ignore some of the expired data. This is a virtual machine, so it does have some missing stuff here, just some internal testing stuff. But so this is what the dashboard would look like now. I'm going to go ahead and unpin this Explore pane so we can kind of get that full screen. So this is what it would look like when it's full screened. There's a lot going on here. I know this is mostly for testing purposes, so it's kind of chaotic, but it has pretty much every single object that we would need or that we can put on a dashboard except for a table. So really quick, just to kind of show you, this is what it looked like before. And then this is what it looked like after. Again, you can see the gauges are actually identical. We went ahead and went with the exact same gauges as before in the newer feature. We were initially thinking about redesigning them, but after some thought, we realized that these pretty much do everything that we need it to without adding too much to it. So instead of recreating the wheel here, we just kind of ripped that out. And so that should look very similar. Most of the gauges should basically look the same as before. Nothing really in particular to point out, but just to demo a little bit of before and after. Okay. So now, again, the bulk of the changes here went into creating new dashboards. I'm gonna go ahead and close this old tab because there's a lot going on there. So I opened up a new tab. We have a new dashboard here. I'm gonna switch to edit mode. So as soon as you switch to edit mode, that Explore pane turns into a controls pane here on the left, this little flyout. This should look somewhat familiar. Our different objects are going to be up here in the top left. We would just take these and drag them onto the canvas. The icons, we removed the text from them. Should be pretty straightforward what they are, especially after a little bit of use. But of course, you can highlight over them to get the little tooltip, and that should explain a little bit more. So we have our 3 different types of gauges here: a trending container, a table. Digital inputs and outputs, those might be the hardest to kind of identify what they are just at first glance. We have our K constants or math constants, controller constants, whatever you want to call it, calibrations and validations, and then a text box here. Then we also have, before I get too much into these, I just want to point out we do have some dashboard wide settings. So well, the obvious things are your dashboard canvas size and your digital inputs and output states. Those should be the same as the previous version. Something very obvious here are these expiration settings. They're now exposed to the user and can be manipulated. These are configurable per dashboard, per the main types of objects. Excuse me. So basically, we can actually control how long certain types of objects wait before they go expired. So these are the default values. They're the optimal value based on testing and how often they update. But we noticed we had not lots, but we definitely had issues in the past where certain customers would have issues with intermittent expiration overlays and things like that. So it was really no way of controlling those. So they just kind of got used to seeing them. Well, now if we have maybe network traffic issues, slower clients, slower servers, and anywhere in between, something is slowing down the system, and it's making the dashboard have delayed updates. We can increase these durations so that it waits just a little bit longer for an update before it actually shows that expired overlay. So This value does not update how frequently it checks for values or grabs a new value. It controls how long it waits for a new value when it expects one to come in before it shows expired. So like I said, the values typically increase to accommodate things like slower networks, slower servers, things like that, so that we don't get those false expiration overlays like we would before. We'll go ahead and hide that for now. Leave everything as default. So, all right, so let's get into some of these objects. For the next couple of minutes, I'm basically just going to go through some of the differences or non-differences between the old objects and the new objects. So just like before, whenever you when you want to, we'll start with our gauges, our number gauges. So just like before, we can either take the gauge if we want a specific type of gauge and we can drag it over. And I can say I want to take a parameter. I'll just grab some from my parameter groups. I'm going to take, let's take a load value, load parameter. I'm going to drop it in here. So it's just going to give us an instant. That's the default interval. I do have push polling enabled, so it's going to be working. Or we can drag it by parameter, and then it'll default as a number gauge. This is the exact same behavior as before. The gauge options should be very similar. All of our caption options up here. We have our different interval drop downs. I'm gonna go greater than 1 hour so we can demo the different averaging types. Before we do that, we have our different gauge types. So it's just a simple drop down just like before. We have our flag options. All the same flag options, a little bit more information included. Color picker has a lot more options here. So all of your previous flag colors will import over just like normal. But if you're selecting or updating or modifying those flag colors, we have a lot more options to pick through. And then our averaging type, they're all the same. We have our building, predictive, and then 2 types of target averaging. We have our target value, where you just type in a value, and then you have a target parameter. If you don't know how these different averaging type works, I'd go into the documentation. It's all fully explained there. But for target parameters, we used to have to go through this little picker here and say, I want to take unit 1. I don't really have anything to compare against load, but we'll just take a parameter and then you would like kind of drag and drop it. So that's not really the workflow anymore. It would work as you would kind of expect it to work. You just have a simple drop down. So this drop down, it gives you all of your different units and then the different parameters in those units. And you can just select a parameter and unit and then update that. So it would change to a target value instead of your normal value displaying. That's pretty much it. So these gauges should work exactly the way as before, and those are just some minor differences there. The training container is pretty much the same. Oops. It was slightly redesigned to work more similar to our charts tool that we just reworked. We would drag it over, and then from there we would take whatever parameters we want and drag it into the training container for it to start drawing. One difference here, well, I guess 2 differences. I'll just point out we do have our look back period. This kind of displays how many points we want to display on the chart. I'm gonna lower that a little bit. The interval is now displayed. So that was something that was requested before. The interval is always going to be displayed on here. Another difference is that the parameters in edit mode are at the top of the chart. This is for just simply displaying them. And then whenever you go into display mode, they'll actually go across the bottom. If you add more information here, like a source and parameter, and you have lots of different parameters included in the chart, it looks much better if it spans across the bottom here. It just looks a little bit cleaner. So it's kind of what we went with. Just something small to point out, nothing major. And that's pretty much it for these. The options, once you click the container, are going to be over here. So you can control the look back history or the default history through this little text box or the plus and minus. And then of course your interval, we can reselect our interval through here. Math constants, I'm going to skip a couple. Math constants, they changed quite a bit, I guess. This used to say controllers. What you would do is you would have like your different controllers. You would actually take the entire controller and you drag it onto the screen, and then from there you would pick specifically what constant you wanted to display. Over here, there was like a field that you would type in to display the constant. Instead, the workflow is exactly the same as all other objects. So you have an expandable tree here. Once you get into that tree, you can just take the constant and drag it onto the canvas. And that's kind of all there is to it. Nothing crazy. If you want to replace it, you drag it, you drop it, and it'll ask you if you want to replace it, just like it does with every other object. So it's more consistent to all the other objects instead of having different workflows specifically for math constants. And you can still allow edit, so you can double click, and I think I have to do that in display mode. Oops. So we can edit the constant and push it to the controller and stuff just like before. The reason that I skipped over our digital inputs, digital outputs, and calibration is because pretty much nothing has changed. They work and look and feel exactly like they did before. One small difference is that when you drag a digital input or you load a dashboard with a digital input and it takes a little bit to load, we added an overlay that says initializing. We don't actually see it. I think it's because I have push polling. It's a little too quick right now. Let me see if I can do it again. You saw it for just a second. It kind of flashed there, but it says initializing now. Instead of displaying a false, true, or open or close on a digital input, it says initializing until it actually is able to get the true value. Nothing crazy, just a little minor change there. Digital outputs, again, work exactly the same. Just all of our caption options, and then we have the option to open or close that output line from the button. And calibrations are exactly the same except for start, stop, or start and abort, I mean. All right, so let me clean this up a little bit. Something that should be a pretty drastic improvement with the new dashboards that we spent quite a bit of time on, and we still have some things to fix. But we do have the ability to edit multiple objects and manipulate multiple objects at a time now, which is pretty huge. So before, let's say if I wanted to change these 3 parameters here, I wanted to change all of them to like 1-minute values. I'd have to go through and select one at a time and blah, 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 blah. So now if I click and drag, I can have this little lasso here. I can select all of the objects. And I'm gonna go ahead and just change all of these to 1 hour data. I know it seems small, but when you're creating dashboards and you have lots of different objects around the screen, that's just a small example, but we could change the gauge types, we can change their position, we can change their size altogether. We could do lots of different things to manipulate lots of objects at once. And this doesn't specifically apply to gauges. They just have the most amount of kind of configurable options here. So I wanted to point that out using those gauges, but yeah, pretty huge. So we can select multiple, we can delete. I'm not actually going to delete them. But even something like that, right? If we had multiple gauges on the screen and I was like, I didn't actually mean to add those. I wanted to add some other ones. I would have to go one by one and delete them. But now we can select all and delete. We have the option to copy and paste as well. So if for whatever reason I wanted to copy all the settings in these gauges, I could do so, and then I'm going to show you 2 ways of doing it. The first way I like the most, I'm going to hold Control I'm gonna click and drag so I can reposition these on the dashboard where I want, and then I can just kind of drop them. And from there, I can use my arrow keys to kind of move them around or whatever I need to do. I can also, I'm gonna delete really fast. I can use my shortcuts, my keyboard shortcuts. So Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and then we have some versions of them there. You can do, since we have tabs, we can copy and paste from one dashboard to another. You know, the possibilities are quite vast. These are just kind of some simple examples, but you can imagine how when you're editing lots of different objects on the screen, being able to select and drag and move and change the size and create, you know, change different object settings for those objects all at once is it's pretty huge. So a little bit of detail here. So we have multiple objects on the screen, and let's say like these are really close together. If I select all of these, there's kind of a question of what's actually going to be displayed over here. What is the, I guess, primary object in this selection of items? So it's kind of hard to see right now, but I think in 7.0 we'll make it a little bit more obvious. We'll see how this changes. But so this heat-in analog gauge here, it has a larger border around it compared to the other ones. I can actually hold Control and I can re-click. Well, let me see. If I click this one and then I drag, holding Control and select these. So now you can see CO2 is the primary object here. So that primary object, when you select when you select by clicking and dragging and you don't select one at a time, it kind of depends which object is picked, but you can always tell by the highlighted object. So when I make changes to this, as far as 6.18 goes, it's only going to modify similar object types settings. So if I say show plant in caption, it's only going to change my gauge my gauge options because they are the same type of object as my primary. And this would be true if regardless of the type of gauge, they are whether it's a analog, a number gauge, or vertical gauge, they're all still gauges. So they'll all still apply, but you can see here that my calibration and my digital output did not get any settings modified by selecting that. So something to be aware of. And again, if you do have a selection of objects that you want, and it's kind of hard, like if you have a lot going on in your screen and it's kind of hard to select specifically which one you want, the way that you would do that is hold Control and select it. And then from there, you can keep holding Control and I can select a couple of different objects. Or I can once I select that first object, I can hold Control and I can drag and use the lasso again. So using different variations of them, you should be able to select the objects that you want. And the next thing that I'll go over is something that you may have seen on the screen. And then for those of you that use it in 6.17, it's something that we added in 6.18, which is pretty huge for, we feel for lining up objects, especially after resizing objects and stuff. We added these little green, I don't actually know what they're called, but these little dotted lines here, and you see them in other applications like Microsoft applications, where it'll help you line objects up on the screen so that you can center or justify objects together. You can line up objects easier and resize. So these were added recently, and I think they'll be a huge help in creating these dashboards and trying to keep things nice and neat. Like I said, it even applies to resizing. So if I resize this, you can see it'll show me what well, it did for a second there, what are like-sized objects, but I resized this one to larger, and if I want to resize it, it'll recognize that there's another object on the screen that's the same size, and it says, hey, that's perfectly lined up if you want to just kind of leave it there. instead of having to do some weird stuff like drop it on top of the other object and trying to get everything to kind of line up. Everything is snapping to these grid lines right now, so it helps. But when you start resizing objects to non-default sizes, you can see you can actually get it to go like in between the different grid lines. And it can make things a little bit tricky. But the green like snap to object and resizing snapping helps a ton. This is something that I would really, if you have questions about both of the multi-object editing and the snap to grid, I would go into the documentation and reference that. So we have our multi-select and mass edit. This is one of the, I think, will be the most useful for people that are just getting into using this new dashboard tool. It's all pretty heavily documented in here. It even kind of that primary control with the larger border. All of these details are kind of in here, and including like moving, positioning, and resizing. All of this stuff is included in the documentation. So it should be really, really helpful. If there's anything that you see that's undocumented, please let us know. We should have caught everything, but you know, there's always some weird keyboard shortcuts and weird button combinations of things that people have found that do unintended actions. So if you find anything like that, please let us know. That is the majority of the changes as far as editing and creating new dashboards. Pretty much covered everything as far as differences. Everything else, it should be at least similar to the way that we did it in old dashboards for those of you that have used it. I do want to, I kind of hinted on it, but I do want to expand a little bit on our dashboard, our different messages here. So when you're in display mode, we did make some changes to the way that expired data is calculated. Like I showed you the configurable expiration settings. And we have our server error and bad connection and that initializing overlay for digital inputs. So just to kind of touch on this really fast. So expired data, just some keywords here. Essentially, it means that it's old data. So the dashboard is either not recently received data, or it's just old, meaning that it hasn't updated, it hasn't pulled from either data controller or OPC or whatever, or maybe calculated via MathPack or Process Now, whatever however it gets its data, it has not received data in the expected duration, so it's going to show up as expired data, so that we're not showing old data and people are thinking it's new or current on a dashboard. Bad connection, basically it means that your client has not communicated with the server for 60 seconds. That's the gist of it. I'm not going to go through and read all of this, but some more information here. And then we have our server error, which basically means that the dashboard client, whatever machine you're using, and the server, they are communicating, but there's a server error that's prevented the dashboard tool from getting new data. In both cases of a server error and bad connection, you should be able to hover over the error message for a tooltip that should give you more details. And then most of especially your errors should be logged. So all of this has, again, kind of been rethought out and should give you useful error messages and useful logging to kind of determine what's going on with the dashboard. That is just about it. I do want to mention, I want to take a little bit of time to kind of mention some things that we do have planned for 7.0. Like I said, this has been a long time coming. So for a couple of releases now, we've kind of had some people play with it, and they've mentioned some improvements that they would recommend. So not all of this was able to get out in a 6.18. So a couple of things are, we did make some improvements to mass editing. There was a couple of bugs that were mentioned or found out that we've fixed. But as far as mass editing goes, for the most part, if you stick to like object types and you try manipulating those and editing those the way that you would kind of expect to, you shouldn't really run into anything big. Most of it has to do with different types of objects being selected at the same time. Nothing is feature breaking. We don't have any errors that are popping up or anything. It's just unexpected behavior when you select different types of objects, essentially. We did make some, we will be making a few performance improvements. These are per object type. So we're kind of going one by one and making some improvements so that each control takes up a little bit less memory and loads a little bit faster in the UI. We found some work that can be improved on the back end. That it takes time, so it'll take time to get to every single object, but we will have some improvements making its way into 7.0. A big one that we're looking at is allowing dashboards to launch automatically when StackVision opens for specific users. So I know this has been requested for a long time now. Like people use it in consoles. So whenever, let's say a technician or somebody logs into StackVision using their personal account or their role-based account, a specific dashboard will open up for them when they log into StackVision. So that they don't have to go and launch all of these manually. So that should make its way into 7.0. Another big one is look back, an interval look back. So I know a big reason why some people haven't switched over to consoles is because they want to be able to look back certain intervals on specific data. It was a feature that we have in consoles that people, well, I don't know that everybody uses it, but some people use it and they can't go back. So if they want data for, let's say, like the previous hour or couple of hours, or they have a specific regulation that they need to look for data across a couple of different hours, and they don't want an average, they want specific values within those hours or days or whatever they want, we have the option to there will be a second option or an additional option here in those gauge settings where we can configure a look back, and we can configure multiple objects with multiple look back periods next to one another. We can even configure it in tables. So if you have a table that you drag over that has those look backs, you can actually it's per line item. So really quick, I'll just drag a table because I didn't really touch on it too much, but nothing has really changed here. Drag a table, drag a parameter. Let's say we want like 1 minute and 1 hour data. So each parameter that you drag over, you can kind of configure some settings per that parameter. So there will actually be an object that shows, a setting that shows up for that parameter where you can configure look back period on a parameter in tables. So if I select, let's say like 3, a look back period of 3, it wouldn't work for instant, but for our 1 minute, we would get 3 minutes back, and for 1 hour, we would get 3 hours back. Arbitrary example, but just to kind of, I guess, add some context there. Then let's see, we are also trying to add the capability, I don't know if this is going to make it in 7.0, we're going to hope, where a user can take a dashboard that they've saved and make a copy of it, but change the unit. So essentially, you don't have to recreate the wheel for every single unit. If they have like parameter names, it will find everything with a like parameter name, and it will, create the same objects in the same placement and whatnot. Basically, copy a dashboard from an existing dashboard, and the only change that would be made would be that the unit would be, let's say, unit 1 to unit 2. So that should be a huge time saver. And then a couple of small things, like we're adding the ability to change this the background canvas color. Some people don't like the dark gray, so we can change it. They can customize it for their preference. And then also the ability to change these gas calibration start and abort buttons and the digital output open and close buttons to something custom. Sorry, I'm going through my checklist, make sure I got everything. I think that's it. If anybody has any questions, like they said, please include it in chat. I'm gonna cover one more thing really fast while everybody gets their questions. Just to point out, we did have an issue reported. So there is a known issue with clients that are using Windows 7. This isn't the server, but the actual client machines that are connecting to dashboards using Windows 7. I won't get into too much of the details, but basically there's some backend protocol that isn't supported by Windows 7. It's a really, really low level issue that Windows supports and Windows 8 and upper versions that we're utilizing in dashboards. Because of this isn't something we're going to be fixing. This is, again, really low level. It's based on the infrastructure of dashboards. So, and for modernizing the feature, we want to continue using it. But unfortunately, it isn't supported by Windows 7. So what you would end up seeing is a message similar to this. This is showing up in your fleet mode status window. Fleet mode does work. It doesn't affect that, but you would see a message similar to this, and basically your dashboards wouldn't be loading in the Explorer pane, or and this also applies to charts here, so the parameters aren't loading in charts. So if for whatever reason this does happen, basically we have two options. The number one thing that we would recommend is work with IT to upgrade client machines to Windows 8 or Windows 10 before upgrading to the new dashboards. So since Windows 8 we will be dropping support at some point. I think it's at the end of the year. We do recommend that customers upgrade directly to Windows 10 if they're upgrading with their client machines. And then the other option is if for whatever reason we don't have the ability to do the workaround number one, we contact customer support. We can look into the issue. We may be able to continue using old dashboards or both versions, so that people that are, or machines that are not using Windows 7 can still use new dashboards and take advantage of those new features. But people that are, for instance, if we have a control system, I mean, a client in your control room that's using a really old operating system, we will be able to use old dashboards on that specific machine. It is only a temporary solution, so long-term solution is definitely going to be approach number one. Like I said, customers won't be able to take advantage of new dashboard features if they don't upgrade. So, and just to say that we will be dropping Windows 7 support anyway in 3 months. I think it's June 30th. This was communicated about a year ago. It's been pushed back a little bit. So just kind of a heads up here. We do have the Windows 7 support ending June 30th, and then Windows 8.1 ending at the end of the year 2022. And then Windows 10 and then Windows 11, well, there's indeterminate end date as of right now. So again, if for whatever reason we come across those issues and we aren't able to upgrade, just reach out to customer support. We can take care of it. They'll be able to help you out. Questions?
Thank you, Jordan. It looks like we have a few questions. One is, can you still only have 6 parameters on a trend?
I believe it is 8. Let's test this though. I know the charts tool was increased to 8, and I think there was a difference between the charts tool and then the dashboard one, where one was 8 and one was 6. But let me see. Oops. Doing. Oh, I already have it there. 5, maybe. All right, that's 6. Let's see, opacity 7. Particulate matter 8. I think that's it. Let's see what happens. Let's just try to break it. Yep, only supports 8 items at a time. And then whenever we get that, this is kind of one of those cases where displaying it across the bottom looks quite a bit cleaner than across the top of the graph.
Another question is, if you edit the constant, does it update the controller or does it update Stack Studio or both?
Both. If you, so controller constants, if you push an update through dashboards, it pushes it to the controller and it pushes it to Stack Studio. However, if a constant is changed in the controller, we're not pulling the controller directly. So it's not backwards as from your example. But that functionality has not changed. That's the same way that it was in old dashboards. Basically, it's looking at the value in Stack Studio. So when you update it, it'll push to both places. When you update it in dashboards, it'll update Stack Studio and the data controller. But if the value changes outside of the dashboard, it's only going to reflect the changes in Stack Studio. That's something that we're looking at changing at some point.
All right, and another question, is there a back arrow? Meaning if we delete something on accident, can we reverse the deletion?
Unfortunately not. So there is, for those of you that are used to keyboard shortcuts, there is a Control-Z shortcut. Let's hide those alarms. But it only does certain things. So I know for a fact that it'll, oh, I have 2 of those. I know for a fact that it will, so I just deleted something. I'm gonna push Control-Z. It actually moved Gauge from one place to another. I'm not sure why it did that, but I know if you do move from one place to another, it'll go back. But I don't think that was my last action, so I don't know why it did that instead of moving this heat input. I would test that. This is one of those things that may not be 100% fleshed out yet. Control-Z is just one of those things that we got for free kind of in developing this new dashboard tool. So if there are issues with Control-Z or you want more behavior out of Control-Z, let us know. That being said, we are planning on adding some I believe they're either going to be right-click options or some extra toolbar icons up here at the top for things like that, like undo. So yeah, let us know.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and thank you everyone for coming. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.